Welcome to The Weekly. This is a podcast brought to you by Calvary Bible Church. I'm your host, Jay Ewing, and this episode is, What Are We Reading?
What are we reading?
As you can tell, Melissa's in the booth.
Hi, friends.
And we're going to sit down and talk about an exceptional book that took Jay Ewing 2 months to read.
Wow.
And that was, it's a large book.
It is.
Quite dense. But before we get in that, friends, you can always go to the show notes to find the link to this book, as well as any other link we talk about. But if you don't find those links, just email me, because I forgot to put them in.
Great.
And above all, we're thankful that you're listening, like always, to The Weekly. You can always do us a huge solid by going and smashing the ratings of this podcast and giving us 5 stars, and only 5 stars, as Thomas Milburn says.
That's right. Not 5 1-star reviews.
Totally.
1 5-star review.
Also, if you find an episode that's super helpful, pass it along to your friends, family. We love getting updates about people dropping these episodes in text to others, as well as maybe to their life group or their friend group here at Calvary. And if something's really meaningful for you in this episode, come jump and talk to me in the lobby about it.
Or me.
Or Melissa. You can always hit us up. We love to talk to you about what we are reading. What are we reading? And we're so thankful you're listening in today. All right. Melissa gets the award for the Thursday of this recording, because instead of grabbing me coffee, she grabbed the second love of beverage in my life, which is
Gatorade.
I love Gatorade.
Yellow or blue?
Yellow or blue. That's how.
Do you have a preference between yellow and blue? You don't have to say the one I brought you just because it's sitting in front of you.
No, yellow is the OG of Gatorade.
Yeah, I like yellow too, and most people don't.
Really?
Yeah, I find that a lot of people are like, yellow Gatorade?
Yeah. There's so many strange flavors out there these days.
I know.
One time I picked up a flavor. This is at our, what is it, a Stop and Go? What is it called?
Come and Go? Stop and Save.
Stop and Save gas station here in Erie. And I picked up a flavor, and I went to the register, and the guy was like, don't buy that flavor. I was like, really? He's like, yeah, it's horrible.
Did you put it back?
Yeah. I was like, okay, thanks.
Is there part of you that's like, you can't tell me what to do?
No, I was like, he probably knows his Gatorade flavors. I'm going to listen to this guy.
That's really great. Well, I had to bring you a Gatorade today.
Yeah.
Because it's game day, sports fans.
It is game day, sports fans. If you're listening to this in 2025, you have no clue what we're talking about. But the Calvary Bible Church Little League.
Pretty much it is.
Yeah, the Golden Owls, which Melissa came out. Big shout out to Matt and Melissa for coming out this last week on Tuesday and watching the first round of the playoffs.
So fun. Jay coaches his adorable son and so many other Calvary boys on the Golden Owls.
Yeah, Cold Creek Little League, and it's a blast.
Yeah, it was fun to watch them play.
We play tonight, and actually, I don't care if we win or lose. I just don't want the season to end. Like, if we lose and have to play a game next week, I would be so happy. I wouldn't care about winning or losing.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
It's gonna be hard to say bye to the Little League season.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, it's just been fun to watch those boys grow.
Yeah, they're all great.
Yeah, they are great.
I love it. So yeah, you had to have a Gatorade.
You have to hydrate or die.
Yeah.
But I figured you would love Gatorade too, because you're the Gator super fan.
Oh, yeah.
And
I do love Gatorade. Do you know there's a Gatorade museum?
No, there is
in Gainesville?
not.
There is.
Oh, I will go to Gainesville just for the museum of Gatorade. I love Gatorade that much.
I know.
Ever since I was in elementary and middle school and watched Michael Jordan drink Gatorade.
Oh, that was the turning point.
Yep.
I actually like Gatorade Zero.
Oh, really?
Of course, zero sugar.
Yeah, totally.
But
I do not like
it. They never have it. That's the thing, that if I put it on my click list, I'm never going to get it. Like, it just isn't going to happen.
Okay, so I went to a burrito place in Boulder last week.
That's random conversation. I love it.
Yeah. Diagonal Plaza, which is the weirdest shopping center in Boulder, but they had canned Gatorade. It's in the can.
No.
Like the original how it tastes the best in a can.
Stop it.
So if you want to ever show appreciation to Jay, I will take Gatorade in a can.
Wow.
I love Gatorade.
What was the name of the burrito place?
I forget. Oh. It was next to the driver's license place.
Were the burritos any good?
They were great.
Okay, great.
But I might have been swayed because of the Gatorade in a can. I was like, "You have this?"
I literally don't think I even knew that Gatorade ever came in a can.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
back
I
in the
guess
80s.
you can like assume.
Yeah,
but 80s, I wasn't
90s.
a Gatorade drinker in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, totally. My dream is someday to have a vending machine with Gatorade in a can in my garage. That'd be awesome. I would have arrived on Earth if that's happening.
That's how you know you're #blessed.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, speaking of that, we're going to jump into Divine Conspiracy by Dallas Willard. Now, I want to say this story because I just hung out with my mentor, who I think probably out of all the men I've ever met, looks and moves and sounds like Jesus the most to me.
Yeah.
And I sat down with him and I was like, hey, I'm reading Dallas, and he studied under Dallas, and they were really good friends before Dallas just passed away recently, actually, last couple of years. And he had studied under some of my favorite authors like Eugene Peterson and J.I. Packer, and have met some, like, he's Yancey, he's in that circle of friends.
Love it.
And he said, Jay, my highest recommendation of Dallas is I have never seen that man not move in the way of Jesus. My whole life I've been around him.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And I was like, well, that's the endorsement of this book.
Yeah. And it's always, there's like I think especially now in the day and age in which we live, there's always the image that's projected to the world. And then unfortunately, a lot of times there's a behind the scenes image that is not the same. And so to have somebody who knows them say that is a high compliment.
Yeah. So I read Dallas Willard back in Bible college. I bought the book that I read even this season from the Ozark Christian College bookstore.
Ozarks.
I could see the sticker from the old bookstore.
I love
how much I paid back then.
I love it.
And I picked it up again because of this series. We're talking about this sort of the season, the rhythm of abiding when we talk about rule of life. So if you don't know, Melissa and I are journeying in 2022, and you're coming along that journey.
Lucky you.
On how to develop a rule of life. And a rule of life is everyone has one. Most of us don't know what our rule of life is.
Yeah. It's what's pushing you forward, what your aim is, where your heart is centered and focused. And if you're not thoughtful about it, a rule of life still is there.
Yep.
It just, you're not aware of it, and you're functioning in a way that maybe you don't want to.
Yep. So we have these themes for each month, and this theme was abide, and I picked Divine Conspiracy, and Melissa agreed to it without seeing how many pages the Divine Conspiracy was.
Big mistake. Huge. I'm just kidding.
One of our faithful listeners says, Jay, you pick large books. And that's probably true.
Yeah. So Melissa's reading of it we'll hold that term really loosely. I listened to part of it.
And we were supposed to record this last month. I was like, I'm not even halfway through yet, Melissa. Like, I'm enjoying this book so much, but it's also a big book. Why did I give this?
Yeah, it's okay.
But I will say this in the recommendation of Divine Conspiracy. It is probably the most modern manifesto of the Christian life that I have read.
Yeah.
And there's only one other book that I would say that would be, and that would be Dietrich Bonhoeffer's Life Together.
Yeah.
And both of the authors write over and explain and sort of process the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah. And I think for me, part of it is this is a book that you kind of dive in and out of, or I would dive in and out of, versus sitting down with the goal of reading it in a month or a couple weeks or whatever. It's kind of one of those that you keep coming back to and taking pieces of it and then mulling that around in your life. And it's better absorbed that way.
Totally. We'll get to that in a little bit, but let me ask you this, Melissa.
Yes.
If you were going to think of a section of the Bible that told you how to live best, what section would that be?
I feel like you're setting me up here.
Well, I am, but I'm also curious because I think everyone would answer that a little bit different, right?
It's true. I think much like in this book, the Beatitudes is a really great place to go to.
Yeah.
Although I think sometimes they are a little challenging to understand.
Yeah, they are.
The application of the words, the specificity of it, if I'm not literally poor, does that mean I'm not blessed?
Right.
There's a lot of intricacies there.
There are. And I can't think of other parts of Scripture. Maybe Romans. Some individuals would be drawn to Romans, sort of the explanation of how to live.
Mm-hmm.
Some probably would be the 10 Commandments.
Yep.
Would probably be a great step in that direction as well.
Those are probably Enneagram 1s because they're
Totally.
like numbered.
Yeah, no doubt. This is organized, and achievable goal.
Yeah.
No, but I think the Sermon on the Mount, most of us probably wouldn't have said that unless we would have prepped that question.
Yeah.
Probably. Because, the hard part about the Sermon on the Mount, and Dallas says this, they are the explanations and illustrations drawn from the immediate settings of the present availability of the kingdom when Jesus was talking about how to live best with God.
Yeah.
And that takes a little bit of translation
Totally.
nowadays for us. And I think Dallas, along with Dietrich Bonhoeffer, but I think as we're talking about divine conspiracy, for me, has given the clearest explanation of what I'm supposed to do when I think about the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or what to do or what to believe when it comes to the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a big topic in his book, is kind of breaking that down. So if you're wondering kind of what this is about, he's kind of in this book refuting the view that Christianity is solely about gaining admittance to heaven when we die, and teaching that as disciples, we have access to the kingdom life now. So he's painting a picture of the Christian life by investigating what God is doing in the world and how we experience it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep. And the root of his writing is this, that God loved us so much that he would send his son. Mm-hmm. And then God loves us so much that he wants to do life with us.
Yeah.
And that's where the abiding piece came in for me when we're thinking about how to abide in our own rule of life. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It reminded me a lot of when we read Gentle and Lowly.
Yep. It's
that same sort of like the things that we think of as our rules for Christian living. We have to do this, don't do this, are not necessarily like we're just obeying those rules. We're obeying those out of an overflow of our relationship with Christ.
Yep, totally. It is. You have to have that relationship and understanding what God is doing and how he's doing it.
Yeah.
He's not a God who's just doing it because he wants it done right. He's doing it because he loves what he's doing.
Totally.
And loves who's he's doing it with.
Yeah.
He writes this in page, I think, 140. The condition of life sought for by human beings through the ages is attained in the quietly transforming friendship of Jesus. Mm. And that is the antithesis of what he's writing about here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that Dallas Willard believes that Jesus quietly, so you don't microwave it today, and it's
right.
But through your relationships, the story you're living, through the family you've been given, through the neighborhood in which you live, through the workplace that you work, mm-hmm. God, Jesus himself, is quietly transforming you into his image.
Yeah. And
that's a long work.
A lot.
And a complex work.
Yeah. I mean, it was we literally just had this conversation before it started of, I have a friend who likes to say that parenting is less about parenting a child and more about parenting your own heart as you react to that child. And that's the same for all of those ways. So,
right.
Like what's going on in our hearts and how that shows up as we live our lives in relationships with people and in the space that we are. How does that play out?
Totally. It makes sense. Yeah, and I think some of the great ideas from this book is that also Dallas says that these are not just how do we participate with Jesus, but how we participate with Jesus brings about the right way in which human life flourishes. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean it's easy.
Right.
It just means that it flourishes and it's lived best under sort of the rule and reign and the participation with God.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And realizing, when we make mistakes, instead of it being a failure necessarily, it's an opportunity to sit at the feet of Jesus and, humbly repent of what went wrong and ask him to show us a better way. And that's what that's about. It's not, you broke the rule. That's so messed up, Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, one of the things, let me ask you this. What are some of the, was sort of the highlight for you from this book? What was the one thing that is you're like, I will think about this, or when someone mentions this, I'll be like, oh yeah, I read that in Divine Conspiracy.
Yeah. I think, the way he talks about being blessed, and this is something that God's constantly reminding me, the way that we use, he doesn't say #blessed. Yeah. Spoiler alert. It's not
He's too old for
Dallas
that.
Willard.
It was written in 1998.
We didn't have hashtags.
That was a pound sign.
It was a pound sign.
That was to get to the operator.
Exactly. But he just talks about, sort of the upside down gospel of Jesus, that the things that I may say I'm blessed because I live in America, because I have a wonderful family, because I live in a nice house. We a lot of times like to say, I'm so blessed. I'm so blessed. And I think the truth of it is, for those situations, I'm so lucky.
Yeah.
I had nothing to do with being born here, or, so many things in my life were being in the right place at the right time, or, hard work combined with just plain luck. And that the way that God sees blessed is so vastly different from how we see it culturally, that it isn't the house or the car or the life we live, that it's actually our relationship with him and the brokenness in our spirit and our humility and all of those things.
Yeah. And his action within us to bring about the blessed presence of himself among us.
Yeah, totally.
To transform us. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that. And then, for anyone who just wants to read quote unquote the book as I did, I felt like chapter 9 was probably the most applicable chapter. And that's where he kind of breaks it down and gives us, what's the title of that chapter? A curriculum for Christ-likeness.
Yep. And his early on in this chapter 9, though, his premise is, you listen, life works best, but in abundance because you obey God. Mm-hmm. And he makes that distinction.
Yeah, kingdom obedience is kingdom abundance.
Yeah,
they are not two separate things.
That's really important to remember so many times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about you? What stood out? What are the things that you...
Well, talk about chapter 9. What are some else? What you said, curriculum for life. What is it? What does he talk about there?
Well, he lays out, number one, you got to love a book that gives you practical steps, right? There is so much of this that is nuanced because it is an overflow of an individual relationship. Mm-hmm. But he does lay out kind of 4 things, which are solitude, silence, study, and then worship. And so that's kind of what he lays out as the progression of the Christian life, or the progression of our relationship with Jesus. It starts with that solitude and that silence, even before, because I feel like sometimes I'm so quick to open my Bible and dig into the word. But when you're able to just be silent before God and follow his goal or his aim for your time in the word versus my devotional says that today is.
Yeah, totally.
Which is, there's a time and a place for that.
Totally.
And that's a totally real thing. But yeah, thinking of that picture of solitude, silence, then study, and then all of that leading to worship. And really, that's what our lives are. How we live our lives is worship to Jesus.
Right.
Yeah.
Living sacrifices. That Romans 12 that we talked about last time in the podcast
Totally.
together. Yeah. I can't get away from his definitions and explanations of the Sermon on the Mount. I think they're masterful.
Yeah.
In fact, if you don't read this book, just read that section when you're reading the Sermon on the Mount to help explain what Jesus is saying.
Totally.
But he does say that, it can be summed up as Jesus summed it up in verse 12 in Matthew, that therefore treat others as you want to be treated. This, of course, his world famous golden rule.
Mm-hmm.
This is the rule that I tell my kids
Yep.
before I get out school. Treat others like you want to be treated. What's the golden rule? But he says, is how Jesus sums up the law and the prophets. In other words, this is love, and everything that is intended for us by God is included within it.
That's
And
good.
I think when I think about the very practical nature of doing life with God and abiding in God, it's just treating others as you would want to be treated.
Yeah, for sure.
At the very tangible. So if you're like, this is a hypothetical.
Okay.
Let's say you got a hangry kid who's ready for dinner.
That's never happened.
Never happened.
Nope.
It comes down to treat those individuals as you would want to be treated.
Yeah.
Or say someone in the grocery line who is agitated and upset or angry, treat others as you want to be treated.
Yeah.
It's if along the coworkers, like the water cooler goes out and no one's going to put the new water jug on.
That's totally hypothetical.
Yeah,
too,
totally.
right?
Treat others like you want to be treated.
Yeah.
And it's so practical for the moment to moment, day to day life as we're trying to do here at Calvary is these Christ-centered communities that are loving God and loving others. This is the idea in which you can live that out.
Yeah, there's another book that I read recently, and he talked about the sort of analogy he gave was you get to the gates of heaven, and there's 100-question test about biblical theology.
Yeah.
And 2 of those questions are about loving God and loving others. You can get all other 98 wrong, but if you get those 2 right, then you've understood the crux of it. Versus if you know all of the theological answers, but you can't get that love God, love others piece, then you've missed it. You've missed what Jesus came for.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. So we always go into a segment saying, who would you suggest? We've talked a little bit about this, but how would you suggest reading this book?
I think slowly. I think it's just, I'll definitely go back and pick up pieces of it and take it in. And I think that it's just something to be savored, I guess is probably the best word for it.
Yeah. Dallas Willard, I've read a couple of his books, and the first 7,500 pages are hard to get through. And I don't know what it is. He's building an argument, I think, sometimes.
Yeah.
Too long.
I was trying to see if I wrote it down, but I did read somewhere that he calls this his most unread book or something like that. It's so funny. It's not an easy one to get through, but it's good.
About 100 pages in, you get through some of the and then beyond that. So, I would suggest that if you've been a believer a long time or need a redefinition of what Jesus is doing in the world, this is your book. But you must do it in community with this book.
Yeah.
So you've got to have multiple months of coffee set up to talk to
Jay.
someone. Yeah, to talk with someone about this book.
Yeah.
And to process what it actually means in your life, what he's saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Some books can be just like inspirational.
No, I think
or
there's
quotable.
a lot of application in here that, takes a while to work out in your own life. It's not something you want to just read through and then move on from.
Yeah. And it's one of the first books we've read that I will say that you shouldn't read this in a life group.
No.
It's a little too dense and too long.
Yeah.
But in a mentoring relationship and
that'd be great.
discipling relationship and a friendship.
Yep.
This is a long read over a long season with someone who you can trust to talk, to debrief what you've been reading.
Totally. There's a lot to pick apart in it for sure.
So when we talk about abide, what do you think are those 4 things, the things that you're going to sort of list in your rule of life?
Yeah, I think so. So I started this week kind of taking apart practices that are already in my life and kind of putting them into these categories that we've.
What are the categories again?
The categories are abiding, mind, body, relationships, rest, work and money, and then hospitality and the gospel. Mm-hmm. So I just started, Jay will hopefully remember to link this in the show notes, but there's a great worksheet that we're kind of going through.
That's right.
And part of it is a chart with
what's the worksheet?
all the practices.
Just say it out loud.
Oh, it's just called isn't it just rule of life?
It's
developing a personal rule of life.
Yep.
And it's through, what's the name of this church? I feel like you would know that. Anyway, I
don't pay attention to those
if you
things
Google
anymore.
developing a personal rule of life, practicing the way.
Yep. It's practicingtheway.org.
Or John Mark Comer, because he's the one whose church this started with or came out of. Then you'll easily find this, but we'll try to remember to link it too. But there's a chart and it has those practices, those 7 practices. And then how do you implement that in your life daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annually? So I just started by going through and thinking about the things that I already do and kind of figuring out where those go on the chart. And I did that so that then I could look at the practices that maybe don't have anything under them or don't have a lot of things filled in. Or for me, it's the seasons that don't have, I don't know that I have things that I do quarterly or annually, Yeah. So trying to figure out where the holes are to be filled in.
Totally. That makes sense. Yeah. For me, I think it's probably around the same thing. It's also, when I think about abiding, for me, I need great explanations of the scriptures because sometimes I have a hard time chewing on them myself.
Yeah.
And so reading the section of the Sermon on the Mount really just helped me to realize that the relationship of abiding in Christ comes out of an overflow of knowing that I'm loved.
Yeah.
And that Christ loves, and that I can love others.
Yep.
And that's Christ's work in me as well. So when I'm thinking about abide, I think those 4 practices are going to be really helpful going forward.
Yeah.
And as I look at rule of life, because the next one is mind.
Yeah.
And we have a book recommendation for that. But before we get there, I think rest is a big one that I've been chewing on the last couple months.
Yep.
And because I think it'll be the hardest one to schedule. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
So for sort of the age and stage of life I'm in, sort of the one that's going to be the hardest to make sense.
Yeah, that's good. I think for me, it's both the time, like what are the quarterly or annually practices that I can put in place. But I don't know, the hospitality thing, I keep coming back to it over and over again. And what does actual biblical hospitality look like? Because I think a lot of times when I think about hospitality in my own life, it's like having your family over for dinner, entertaining. Exactly. So what is actual biblical hospitality, and do I practice that in my life? So that's what I'm excited to dig into a little bit.
So here's our segment. What are we reading? We call it the Gin segment. And this is where we give you a heads up of the book we're going to be reading next month. What book will we be reading, Melissa, next month?
We are going to be reading, I forgot the name of it already.
Live No Lies.
Live No Lies. Thank you.
That's your favorite book in the last 3 years.
I use favorite book pretty broadly.
Yeah.
I do love it. It is a good book. It is a good book. So Live No Lies, John Mark Comer. If you check it out through the library, you might get the copy that I originally had. And then you can see I fold down like the bottom corner when there's something. I just
saw this copy at the library last night.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, I did. I should have. If I'd known that, I would have totally picked it up to see that and snapped you a pic.
Because then I did read it and then I had to buy it.
Yeah.
Because, there were too many folds in it. Yeah. I needed to highlight and write in the margins and all that good stuff. But yeah, Live No Lies, John Mark Comer, talking about what it's like to have our mind focused on Jesus and how to apply that.
Yeah, so I'll link that in the show notes as well, the book that's coming up next month. All right, Melissa, any final words as we wrap up this little section of Abide and we move on to mind and our rule of life?
No, I'm just excited. I'm excited about this rule of life. I think it's going to be a good journey. How about you?
Yeah, if nothing else, you and I will develop our rule of life and everyone else will just have to patiently listen through it.
Lucky them.
Lucky them. Welcome to our lives. Hopefully. But, I think the rule of life is a must in 2022.
Yeah, I do too.
Let's get serious about it, right?
Yep.
All right, Calvary, we love that you're listening. Let us know, like always, observations, ideas. If you read The Divine Conspiracy, loved it or hated it, let us know. As well as when you read it in the next couple of months, let us know that you're reading it. We'd love to encourage you along on that journey. As well as you can find out what's happening at Calvary, always at calvarybible.com. We love that you visit that website, submit a prayer request, let us know, get connected, go to calvarybible.com and figure out who I am by my staff picture.
Jay? Oh, I don't have one there. How did they figure out who I am?
Good luck. Good luck, world. Good luck. We love you. Talk to you soon. Melissa, like always, thanks for being in the booth.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.